The third year after my death, Matt came back. The boy who once couldn't even scrape together $300 had transformed into a ruthless business tycoon. And this time, he was back just to watch me fall apart. He wanted to see me devastated, begging for his mercy. But what he didn't know was, I had already died 3 years ago. Every LED screen in the city was flickering, broadcasting the same headline. Matt Harding returned to town. A swarm of reporters followed him from the airport all the way to the entrance of the Harding Corporation building. And in the middle of the crowd, I spotted my deaf and mute father. Of course, Matt saw him too. His assistant even made a point of letting my father push through the crowd. Dad gestured frantically in sign language, his expression full of urgency. Matt remained indifferent. It's been 3 years, and your precious daughter still hasn't gotten you treated, he scoffed, his voice dripping with mockery. Looks like she hasn't been doing so well after all. The disdain in his eyes was unmistakable. His tone, his posture, it was as if he were looking at a piece of trash. Dad continued to sign, sweat beading on his forehead in desperation. Matt let out a cold chuckle. I don't have time to waste on you. Then, in one final, desperate move, my father dropped to his knees. Every reporter instantly turned their cameras toward him. Flashes flickered endlessly, illuminating his helpless form. Still, Dad kept signing, his hands trembling with urgency. Matt frowned. He didn't understand sign language. But he knew one sign: money. Are you asking for money? He guessed. Dad nodded immediately. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Who the hell is this guy? Begging for money here, of all places? You don't know? He used to be someone. He was the president of the Foster Corporation. Foster Corporation? Didn't they go bankrupt 3 years ago? Yeah, and you know why? Because his daughter, Laura, dumped Mr. Harding for being poor. Serves them right, karma's a bitch. And now he has the nerve to show up here begging for money? Disgusting. The reporters passed the story along like wildfire. Within minutes, everyone had memorized every detail. Matt, on the other hand, was clearly enjoying the show. A cruel smirk played at the corner of his lips. And what makes you think I'd give you money? He sneered. I'm not Brian. Brian Heath. The man I had left Matt for. Back then, the Foster family was already crumbling. The only way to stabilize our standing was through a marriage alliance with the Heath. I still remember Matt's father was sick at the time. It was when he needed me the most. And yet, I had abandoned him without hesitation. I had wanted to make sure he would give up on me completely. So I said things I knew would hurt him the most. And now that he had built his empire, the first thing he did was come back just to watch me suffer. You want money? Fine, Matt said, staring directly at my father. But let Laura come and beg me herself. His voice was slow, deliberate, as if savoring every word. Just like you're doing now. Dad trembled on his knees, his hands still forming desperate pleas. Matt tilted his head, a glint of mockery in his eyes. Or is it that Miss Foster only lowers herself for the Heath? He chuckled coldly. Because, if I remember correctly, the Heath sent all of you into poverty. His gaze turned icy, towering over my father like a vengeful god. Mr. Harding, a hesitant voice chimed in. One of the reporters. I think he's saying his wife is gravely ill and needs money for treatment. Laura once invested in your company and he's hoping to withdraw that money back. ## Chapter 2. Matt's assistant wasn't the best at sign language, but the translation was close enough. Laura's investment? Then let her come and take it herself. My father continued signing frantically. He wanted to say that I was dead. But he couldn't bring himself to form the words. 3 years ago, Foster Corporation collapsed overnight. My medical expenses had drained them dry. The surgery I was supposed to have the next day never happened. There simply wasn't enough money. My father had gone door to door, begging for help. But the business partners, the so-called friends, all kept their distance. Desperate, I had called Matt. I had wanted to reclaim the money I had left with him, but he never answered. In the end, I lay on that hospital bed, trapped in pain and died in agony. Or is your precious daughter too high and mighty to see me in person? Matt's voice was laced with mockery. Face it, Mr. Foster. The Foster era is over. South River belongs to me now. His sharp gaze pierced through my father, as if trying to see through to me. My mother was gravely ill and I was sure my father wouldn't last much longer either. I followed Matt to his office. He sat at his desk, wiping the dust off a photo frame. He hated me with every fiber of his being for leaving him. And now, he had returned just to humiliate me, to make me grovel. Yet, of all the possibilities he had calculated, he never accounted for one thing: I was already dead. His assistant went to report to him. After Laura Foster got engaged to Brian Heath, they never actually got married. Matt finally set the frame down. That's when I saw it. It was my picture. Was it there to remind himself of his hatred? His resentment? He tapped the glass surface with his fingers. I'm more interested in knowing where she is now. And whether she's suffering. The Foster family lost everything. She's probably living worse than an average person, his assistant replied. Just as I expected, Matt's brows instantly relaxed. That's how it should be. He had come back to witness my downfall. That was all he wanted. The assistant made a few calls before returning. Mr. Harding, we couldn't find any trace of Miss Foster. We asked around, but no one knows where she is. Of course they couldn't. When I died, my family had been trampled underfoot. They couldn't even afford a funeral. My father had buried me himself, in the dead of night, in an unmarked grave. Aside from my parents, no one knew I was gone. Have you tried the Heaths? Matt suggested. His assistant looked hesitant. She hasn't been in contact with them for years. Oh? Does she think the Heaths aren't good enough for her either? Matt chuckled darkly, shaking his head before turning back to his laptop. The conversation was over. His assistant hesitated before adding, I've told them to keep searching. We'll hear back soon. Matt gave an absent nod. I didn't linger any longer on Matt's side. Instead, I went to the hospital. My mother lay in bed, pale, her condition looking grim. My father stayed by her bedside, unwilling to leave even for a moment. The nurse passing by looked at him and shook her head sympathetically. He hadn't always been like this. After our family's downfall, he was set up and ended up both deaf and mute. What I hadn't expected was Brian to be here too. My mother's medical bills were all being covered by him. But Brian wasn't the Heath family's heir. The Foster name was now reviled, and naturally, the Heaths didn't approve of Brian getting too involved with us. The money he provided for my mother's treatment was barely enough to keep her alive. Back when the Fosters fell, I didn't want to drag Brian down with me. And I couldn't forget Matt. So, I broke off our engagement and ended things with Brian. I never imagined that, after all these years, he was still looking after my mother. Perhaps, in some way, I owed the Heaths for this. Just as I was about to leave the room, Brian's phone rang. I drifted toward the hallway and froze when I heard the voice on the other end. It was Matt. Why is it that for years, there's been no trace of Laura anywhere in the Baythorn? Where is she? I instinctively stopped in my tracks. Brian seemed just as surprised. You really don't know? ## Chapter 3 Cut the crap, Brian. Matt's voice turned sharp with irritation. I know she's with you. Bring her to the Empire Hotel tonight at 8. But before Brian could finish, Matt's voice cut through once more. Think carefully. Do you reckon the Heath can afford to go against me? Silence. Even after the call ended, Brian stood frozen in place. Slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a watch. It was the pocket watch I had given him for his birthday. My father had been watching him carefully. With trembling hands, he signed, Was that Matt? Brian nodded. My father hesitated before signing again, Today is the last day. If we don't get the money, they'll stop her treatment. I need to see Matt. Desperation filled his aged face. These past 3 years had worn him down until he was barely a shadow of the man he used to be. Once, he had been a powerful businessman, commanding respect in every boardroom. Now, he looked like a broken old man. Brian hesitated. He wanted to refuse. But when he looked at my mother, at her bloodless lips and frail body, he let out a heavy sigh and nodded. I had given Matt $30,000 before leaving him. He once said he wanted to start a business, so I gave him the money as startup capital on the condition that he break up with me. That amount might be nothing but pocket change to him now. But for my mother, it was a matter of life and death. That night, the Empire Hotel was packed with elite figures from various industries. And in the most prominent seat, high above the rest, sat Matt. He surveyed the crowd from his vantage point, his gaze cool and detached, as though he were looking down on a pile of trash. He still carried himself with that same arrogance. Finally, his eyes landed on Brian. A smirk curled at the corner of his lips. But when he saw the man standing behind Brian, my father, his brows furrowed. And when he realized I wasn't there, his grip tightened around his glass until it shattered. As Brian and my father approached, Matt calmly wiped his hands. A stark red stain bloomed against the pristine white of his handkerchief. "Where's she?" he asked, his tone unreadable. Brian hesitated before lowering his gaze. "She couldn't come." Matt didn't get angry. Instead, he leaned back against the couch, letting out a slow, amused chuckle. His legs crossed, his gaze swept over Brian, cold and taunting. "What? Am I still not good enough for Miss Foster to see me in person?" He laughed, the sound sharp and laced with mockery. "She left me without a second thought," he mused, his eyes distant, lost in the past. "Threw me away like I was nothing but trash." His jaw tightened. "Also she could join the wealthy and powerful Heath family?" His head snapped toward Brian, eyes narrowing. "Tell me, how much? Name your price." Brian's expression darkened. "I don't think I understand you, Mr. Harding." Matt took a slow sip of water, the ever-present smirk still playing on his lips. "After all these years, you must be tired of her," he said casually. "Name your price." He set the glass down and leaned forward, his voice dangerously soft. "Sell her to me. Laura is not an object." ## Chapter 4 Laura. Matt repeated my name, his voice dripping with disdain as if even the memory of me was something too filthy to acknowledge. He let out a low chuckle, leaning back lazily in his seat before tossing out a number. 8 million. Brian clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white, barely holding back his anger. "Where were you when she needed you the most? She reached out to you." Matt scoffed, eyes glinting with disdain. "Oh, now that I finally have power, she finally remembers? I thought Miss Foster was far too noble to talk to someone like me. Guess she wasn't as innocent as we all thought, huh? Watch your mouth," Brian shouted. To Matt, Brian's rage was nothing more than a kitten baring its claws. He barely spared him a glance before coolly upping the offer. 10 million. If Laura knew what kind of person you've become, she would have swallowed her pain rather than ever reaching out to you, Brian said through gritted teeth. Still not enough? 200 million. She would never dash enough. Matt's expression turned ice cold in an instant. Just because I'm letting you talk, you think you can do whatever you want? Don't forget, I have my limits too, Brian. And if you don't tell me where she is, if I find her first, I swear, I will make her life a living hell. I believed him. Matt never let a grudge go unpaid. The two men locked eyes in a tense standoff. Just then, my father started gesturing frantically, his hands trembling as he held up 3 fingers. 30,000. Matt got up and strode toward him, towering over his hunched figure. My father clasped his hands together, bowing repeatedly with a servile grin. The same man who once valued his dignity more than his life was now reduced to begging Matt for mercy. He, Gray Foster, had truly fallen from grace. Matt placed a heavy hand on my father's shoulder. The once mighty Gray Foster now living lower than a dog. With that, Matt shoved him down hard. My father, already weak, collapsed onto his knees with a dull thud. Yet, he still forced a smile, holding up those same 3 fingers. I already told you, if you want money, let Laura come to me and beg for it herself. Brian moved to help my father up, but the bodyguards pinned him down before he could reach him. Matt, don't you dare. If you have a problem, take it out on me. What do you gain from tormenting an old man? Matt ignored Brian's struggles, turning his sharp gaze back to my father. You said your wife is sick. My father's eyes lit up, nodding eagerly, mistaking Matt's words for an act of kindness. Then I'll give you 10 minutes. If I don't see her in 10 minutes, I can promise you no hospital in Baythorn will treat your wife. My father's face went pale as panic overtook him. He burst into tears, desperate. Understand? Matt, however, simply patted his cheek lightly. At last, my father broke down completely, sobbing as he shakily signed, Laura is dead. But of course, Matt would never understand. Brian finally wrenched free from the guard's grasp and ran to my father. Why are you doing this? Laura owed you nothing. Why can't you just let go and move on? For a moment, I wondered if it was just my imagination, but the second Brian said I had moved on, Matt's expression darkened instantly. You think I can just let go? His voice was dangerously low. She was the one who threw me away first. I swallowed my pride and begged her, but what did she do? She didn't even look back, too busy chasing after you, wasn't she? I just want to see how miserable she's been these past 3 years. Brian's eyes reddened as he lifted his head. You just want her to admit she was wrong, don't you? But she never will. If you have any decency left in you, give Mr. Foster the money. I'll say this one last time, bring Laura to me. Let her beg, let her grovel. The more pathetic she looks, the more I'll pay. 3 years, Brian whispered, his voice trembling. For 3 years, she lay bedridden in a hospital, suffering until she died in agony. Not once did she forget about you. Your name was the last name she prayed for. Brian let out a shaky breath, his eyes burning with grief and anger. But what did you do? You ignored every call. You turned away from her, shutting her out with nothing but cruel, heartless words, humiliate her even in death. What? Hashtag chapter 5. Matt's expression froze as he turned, veins bulging at his temples. What the hell are you talking about? He grabbed Brian by the collar, his bloodshot eyes burning with fury. I let out a cold laugh. If he knew I was dead, he'd probably dig up my grave just to get his revenge. You want to see Laura? Fine. Brian's voice was steady, but his gaze held a somber weight. Actually, I didn't want to say this, but since it's come to this. Laura is dead. She died 3 years ago. At that exact moment, Brian's phone rang. Processing the shock of what he had just heard, Matt loosened his grip, his fingers trembling slightly. Hello? Brian immediately answered. Mr. Heath, we wanted to inform you that Mrs. Foster is in critical condition. I know. Brian snapped, frustration lacing his voice. He was about to explain what had just happened, but Matt was having his own call. I sighed, bracing myself for what was coming next. All right, Matt finally said before hanging up. Before he could turn away, Brian grabbed his arm, his grip ironclad. Give him the money. If you don't, Mrs. Foster won't make it. Matt stared at him for a long moment before his fist shot out, landing a solid punch to Brian's face. I've told you I have limits. You think I lie? Brian wiped the blood from his lip. I have no time for it. Think about it. You've been looking for her for 3 years and you haven't found a single trace. Doesn't that tell you something? Matt's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. No one I asked ever heard a word about her dying. This has to be your trick. Where is she? Where the hell are you hiding her? Brian let out a bitter laugh. That's because her family lost everything overnight. Laura was sick for years, but she was scheduled for surgery the next day. One operation and she would have been fine. But that night, the Foster family collapsed and everything changed. The surgery was cancelled. The medical bills piled up and they couldn't afford them. That's what killed her. She wasn't even buried in a proper coffin. I rubbed my arms as Brian spoke. What good would it do to tell Matt all this? It would only make him hate me more. Then show me. Matt's voice was eerily calm. I'll pay you for it. He motioned to his guards, who immediately brought over a suitcase. Flipping it open, he sent stacks of cash spilling onto the floor in front of my father. My father scrambled to gather the money, his shaking hands clutching at the bills as he laughed through his tears. With the money secured, he rushed to the hospital, leaving Brian to lead Matt to my grave. It was a desolate sight, overgrown with weeds. If you didn't look closely, you'd think it was just another patch of wild land. Matt stood there, staring at the tombstone, his face unreadable. Slowly, he reached out to touch it. What was he hoping to feel? It was just stone, cold, lifeless, covered in dust. Then, right on cue, he snapped. His fist slammed into the tombstone before he dropped to his knees, clawing at the grave like a madman. See? I knew it. He wouldn't hesitate to dig me up if he thought it would give him the satisfaction to revenge. I sighed. Well, it's not like it really matters anymore. I'm dead, after all. What the hell are you doing? Brian yanked Matt up, his hands bloodied from scraping at the dirt. Why did she die? Why? Matt pulled out his phone, scrolling frantically through old calls. I glanced at the screen. He was scrolling through my contact. The last call between us was from 3 years ago. A missed call. Or rather, 13 missed calls. Hashtag chapter 6. I still remember that day. My parents were holding my hands. Brian sat at the edge of my hospital bed, his face filled with sorrow. His arm was covered in bruises from a whipping, the Heath family's so-called discipline. When he caught me looking, he hurriedly pulled down his sleeve. I'll go home and ask for more money, he muttered hesitantly. I reached out weakly, grabbing his wrist. He tried to pull away, afraid of hurting me, but even that slight movement sent me into a violent coughing fit. You've done enough. After the Foster family collapsed overnight, we became the public's favorite target, scorned and ridiculed. Even the Heaths, once allies, wanted nothing to do with us. They forbade Brian from getting too close to me. When he defied them, kneeling outside their gates in the cold for an entire night, all he got in return was a brutal beating. I coughed again, my chest tightening painfully. Laura. Brian looked desperate, clutching my hand as if he could hold me together just by sheer will. Just, don't go. I'm fine, really. I forced a weak smile, trying to reassure him. He held on to me tightly, his reluctance written all over his face. Mom. I want to hear Matt's voice one last time. No one expected me to say that. The room fell into silence. On the TV, a news segment played, featuring none other than Matt, the rising business mogul, celebrated and untouchable. His name lingered in the air, a name I hadn't spoken in 3 years. My mother was the first to react. All right. She took out her phone and dialed his number. It barely rang before someone picked up. Hello? Hi, Matt. It's me, Laura. A scoff echoed through the line, dripping with disdain. But it wasn't Matt's voice, it was his assistant's. What a surprise, Miss Foster calling our CEO. What's the occasion? Trying to worm your way back in now that you see how successful he is? Let me remind you, Miss Foster, our CEO isn't the same man he used to be. So, do yourself a favor, stop calling him and get lost. Click. The call was cut off. I stared blankly at the screen, my mind numb. After all this time, after struggling so hard to dial that number, after gathering the last bit of courage I had left, it wasn't even Matt who answered. A shudder racked my body. I coughed violently, my breath turning shaky. My skin felt ice cold and I couldn't stop shaking. Just days ago, I had thought the daily medication wasn't making much of a difference. I felt pains, but it's manageable. But after missing 2 doses today, the effects started to hit me hard. It felt as though all the pain I had felt before was amplified 100 times and now I was experiencing new kinds of pain, equally intense. Is he not picking up? I asked weakly. My mother kept redialing, her voice soft and coaxing, as if trying to comfort a child. Maybe he's just away from his phone. He'll pick up soon. I'm sure he will. My father stood by, his eyes red, but he fought to keep strong. His pain was silent, but I could feel it radiating from him, thick and heavy. Laura, don't sleep. Stay with us, sweetheart. Stay with us, he urged desperately. My mother clung to me, her warmth barely reaching my cold skin. I can't. I can't just sit here and watch, Brian muttered, getting up from his seat. I'm going to see my friends. There has to be a way. There must be. His voice cracked, raw with helplessness, but his footsteps were firm as he stormed out of the room. My vision blurred. My world felt like it was dimming and my consciousness was slipping away, like grains of sand falling through my fingers. No, Brian. I tried to call out to him, but my voice was too weak, barely more than a whisper. Brian. I gathered all my strength to shout his name, but the effort caused me to collapse. Brian turned mechanically, his face twisted in grief as he rushed over to grasp my hand, tears streaming down his face. Everything felt distant, fading, dissolving. The memories of my life flickered before my eyes like an old film reel, moments playing one after another. I watched them, a bittersweet smile forming on my lips. Mom, look. He's here. Matt's here. I laughed softly, my voice trembling. I reached up, my fingers searching for something, someone that wasn't there. A tear rolled down my cheek as I whispered, but I don't love you anymore, Matt. I really don't. As I spoke, my hand fell slowly from the air. My body no longer obeyed me, but I could still hear their sobs. It felt as though my soul was being pulled away from my body and I simply watched them in silence. I could no longer hear their cries. I was merely a spectator now, watching from somewhere beyond, as my soul slowly drifted away. ## Chapter 7 How could she die from an illness? Matt shouted. Your family are loaded, one of the richest in the city? How could you just let her die? Matt's outburst yanked me back to reality. What are they talking about? Brian sat there, slumped, looking utterly defeated. Just from his posture, I understood everything. For the past 3 years since my death, Brian had been drowning in guilt. He blamed himself for my death. He thought it was his fault. When the foster fell, my family broke off the engagement. The Heaths broke off the engagement. My family, they cut me off. Took everything. They forbid me from having anything to do with the Fosters. My brothers were kept under watch. No one could come to see me. I watched her life slip away and I couldn't do a damn thing about it. Matt clenched his fist and punched the air. Pathetic. Oh, I'm pathetic? Brian let out a bitter laugh. What does that make you? She was calling your name with her last breath. You ignored her calls. Let me tell you, she's not afraid of death. She was welcoming her fate. But it's your assistant, your damn assistant, said things that broke her more than death ever could. I was tired of listening to them. So I left for the hospital. My mother was still in surgery. My father paced outside, anxiety written all over his face. Midnight came and the doctor finally emerged, looking exhausted and hesitant to speak. I already knew. She was gone. Mr. Foster. I'm sorry for your loss. If she'd been brought in just 30 minutes earlier, the condition wouldn't have been this severe. My father collapsed onto the waiting room chair, sobbing, his face twisted in anguish. His whole body trembled as he clutched the seat for support. Brian and Matt rushed in from the stairwell just in time to hear the doctor's words. Matt looked like he had been hit by a freight train. If he had just given the money sooner, my mother wouldn't have died. He clutched his chest, his face drained of color. I'm so sorry. My father didn't even look at him, just sat there, shaking, his shoulders silently heaving with grief. Matt took a step forward, but Brian blocked him, shaking his head. Haven't you done enough? This is the last family Laura had left. Just leave him. Matt hesitated, then stepped back. I felt my body fading. It's a strange sensation. Cold. Weightless. Distant. You're getting married soon, aren't you? I snapped my head. Matt flinched and turned to Brian, his expression stunned. How do you know? Brian only smiled faintly and patted Matt's shoulder. Then let me congratulate you in advance. I wish you well. I just did it to piss Laura off, Matt said somberly. But I heard you've been together for 3 years. Brian didn't wait for a response. He just turned and walked off, heading toward a nurse. Matt stood frozen, staring after him. 3 years. So he already had a new girlfriend when I broke up with him. He didn't say a word after that, just stood by the window, lost in thought. I stood beside him, watching the city lights, watching him. We stood there together all night. After my mother's funeral, Matt secretly bought my father a house under Brian's name. He even hired a caretaker to look after him. He knew if my father found out it was from him, he would never accept it. I didn't know how long I would linger in this in between. Then the day came, Matt's wedding. His bride was beautiful, elegant, a drop of sunshine in form of human. I saw Brian attending to the occasion. Do you, the bride, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? To have and to hold, in sickness and in health? Matt's bride smiled sweetly. I do. Chapter 8 And do you, the groom, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? To cherish and protect, through all of life's trials? Matt hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then, I do. The ceremony ended and I clapped along with the crowd. And just like that, my soul returned to my grave. I spent my days sitting on my tombstone, swinging my legs, watching the world move on. I thought this was it. That I would just fade away, forgotten. Then one day, Matt came. With his wife. She was kind, her smile soft as the breeze. "Laura, I came to see you. This is my wife. I wanted to introduce her to you." I knew then. This was what I had been waiting for. The weight of unfinished business had kept me here. I was so happy. I smile, though tears blurred my vision. Perfect. It's perfect. And in that moment, I felt it, my body dissolving, my very existence fading away. Matt knelt beside my grave, his fingers brushing away the dust that had settled on my headstone. As I disappeared, Brian arrived. Matt suddenly looked up, I thought our gazes met, that he could see me. But then, I shook the thought away. That wasn't possible. I lifted my head too, watching the willow leaves dance in the wind. Matt's POV, I saw Laura. I didn't know she was dead. The day Brian took me to her grave, I saw her. Standing there. Her ghost. I couldn't believe that she was gone. For years, I held on to my grudge, remember her as the most painful memory of my life, and now, she was dead. When I saw her, I wanted to scream at her, "Why didn't you wait for me?" But I didn't. She left before I could say anything, like she couldn't be bothered to listen whatever I was arguing with Brian. That night, I visited a psychic. Told him everything. Brian looked at me like I was crazy, then turned back, searching. "She's not here," I told him. The psychic said Laura was trapped by her unresolved regrets. Whatever she had held on to in life had to be resolved before she could move on. Otherwise, staying in this world would slowly consume her until there was nothing left. She wouldn't have a chance for reincarnation. I had no idea what was keeping her here. So I turned to Brian. "Is it you?" Brian stared at me for a long time, silent. I thought he was too stunned to answer. But then, in a quiet voice, he said, "It's you." I wanted to dismiss it as nonsense, but when I met his steady gaze, I swallowed my doubts. Then, he told me the truth about that day. I never knew how much she had suffered in those 3 years. For 3 years, we buried our feelings deep inside. And now, as we finally confronted them, we were separated by life and death. The psychic gave us advice. We had no choice but to follow it. That night, Brian suddenly said, "You're getting married soon, aren't you?" Chapter 9. To make it more convincing and complete the story, I threw a wedding. And just as I expected ******, she came. Seeing her like that, my heart crumbled to pieces. I wanted to tell her it was all fake. Screamed at her, that none of this was real. But I couldn't. She turned and left. There was no point in continuing the charade. "Take your money and leave." The entire hall stood up at once. One by one, the guests walked out, because every single person in that hall, except for Brian and me, were hired actors. Following the psychic's advice, I took my bride with me to send Laura off one last time. She sat on her own gravestone, legs swinging back and forth. I hadn't wanted to look at her. I was afraid she'd notice. But in the final moments, I gathered the courage to lift my head. Our eyes met. That fool. She actually thought I was looking at the willow leaves drifting in the wind. I wasn't looking at the leaves, idiot. I was looking at you. I want to tell her. I reached out, wanting to touch her, but my hand passed right through. And as she slowly faded away, a single tear slipped down my face. I'm sorry, Laura. Brian was there, too. Even though he couldn't see her, he had come to say goodbye. Beside me, the woman I had hired as my bride looked up. Is it over? I nodded. Does it mean the job's done, Mr. Foster? Yeah. Go collect your payment from my assistant. Thank you, Mr. Foster. She was practically skipping to my car. I turned to Brian. He didn't say a word. Want to grab a drink? I asked. No. Laura doesn't like me drinking. I scoffed and dragged him along. Come on, she won't be mad this time. I never imagined that after that day, so much would change for both of us. The wine didn't go to waste. The next day, Brian became the heir of the Heath family. He said he wasn't interested, but I could tell he was secretly pleased. After all, he had finally repaid a dream from 3 years ago, didn't he? He was no longer the helpless, easily manipulated younger son of the Heath family. The end.